When I interviewed Leisha Politis last year, she lent me this book, Three Dimensional Quilling by Jane Jenkins, published in 2007. I'd heard of Jane Jenkins before because I've bought quilling paper from her store. And when I saw this book, I was immediately excited to try some 3D quilled figures. In this short book review, I'll show you some of the pieces I made from it, let you know where I made some changes to the designs, and finish with my thoughts on this book. As Jane says in her introduction, three-dimensional quilling is such a joy and everyone should try it. And after trying it myself, I couldn't agree more. At the start of the book, Jane covers the materials you'll need and the equipment that you'll need, and I found it really interesting, considering this book was published in 2007, just how much has changed in the quilling world just since then. For example, she refers to an onion holder to make the wings of an angel, but these days you can actually buy quilling combs for that exact purpose. Also, she recommends 2 pairs of scissors, a normal pair and an extra fine pair for fringing the strips. And these days you can also buy custom paper fringes that fringe the paper finely and evenly. I don't have one myself, so I had to use small scissors. But when I was at the Sydney Quillers meeting in February, one of the ladies I sat next to had one and demonstrated it to me, and it was such a nifty little gadget, and I'm very keen to invest in one. Jane also covers the basic techniques, including how to turn coils into cones. And I admit that I didn't use any of these methods properly for my projects and suffered because of it, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. So this book is A4 size, and the photos on the pages make the characters look massive. Initially I thought, oh my goodness, these characters are going to use so much paper. But as the inside of the book cover says, to give an idea of scale, the main fairy shown on the front cover is 7.6 centimetres high. My favourite quote from this book is, "Cup and cone coils can be found often in antique quilling, but not for making characters. So we modern quillers can proudly say we are breaking new ground, using old techniques and making history." I think this is great. I love that people are taking ideas and switching them up to make new ideas. So there are 5 projects in this book: finger puppets, long-legged frog, poodle, fairy, and an angel. And of these, I made 3 projects: the frog, poodle, and fairy. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I made each of these. The first character I made was the long-legged frog. Jane Jenkins said that she got the idea for the long-legged characters from wooden toys with string arms and legs, and that they lollop around to the great amusement of all. However, when I was making my frog, I found that the hands and feet would be too heavy for the tendril arms and legs, and that they'd be too fragile and risk tearing, or that they'd be straightened out over time and lose their curl. And then there'd be no way of tightening them up again to turn them back into a tendril. So I decided to go completely against what this frog was supposed to be about with the string arms, and I looked up a cartoon frog on the internet and replicated the legs of a sitting frog folded up against its body. One of the hardest parts I found with this design was gluing the 2 cone coils of their head so that they stayed together but with the mouth still open. In step 4 of the instructions, it simply says glue the top rim to the outer rim and wait for the glue to go tacky. But I found that the glue just was never strong enough and the cup coils kept falling into each other, and his mouth wouldn't stay open. So in the end, I glued some additional strips on the back as reinforcement. The other part I had trouble with was the body. In the instructions, it says to keep adding strips until it is 4.5 centimetres tall. And in the picture, the cone looks nice and smooth, but I found it really difficult to get that smooth gradation. I made several attempts, but in the end, I just settled with this slightly strange effect because I couldn't get the strips to move smoothly. As I mentioned, if I was doing it again, I'd follow the instructions at the start of the book to get the effect right and make it a smooth gradation. So, lesson learnt for me there. And I really like the eyes and the strip of white that gives it life. I think it looks really effective. But overall, I'm really happy with how my little frog turned out. I think he's really cute and full of character. And I'm keen to try out the bird, cat and mouse figures that Jane includes as additional projects one day, although again, I probably won't use the tendril arms and legs for these ones either. The next figure I made was the poodle. And I made a separate video showing how I made this and the process that I went through, and it was such a fun piece to make, and it was also the first time I'd actually used fringed paper strips. And I don't actually have a paper fringer, so cutting the strips was very time consuming and very uneven, but I'm still so happy with it and I think he looks awesome. When I was making this piece, I was always using more glue and reinforcement than what Jane uses in her instructions. For example, gluing the head to the neck and then the neck and the tail and the legs to the body, it just never seemed like enough glue on its own on such a thin edge was ever going to be strong enough. I felt that they were just going to snap off. So in the end, I ended up reinforcing these joins with additional strips of paper, and even the pom-poms I ended up reinforcing to the body so that they were stronger and wouldn't break off. Also, rather than drawing on the eyes, I decided to use googly eyes. I think it's quite fitting because apparently poodles are a little bit mad. And to finish, I glued a diamante onto his collar to add a little bedazzle. So I think this poodle is hilarious and it was so much fun to make, and I really enjoyed making the how-to video as well. So here's a 10-second teaser from that video, and I'll link it at the end so you can watch it after this one.
Strike the pose. Strike the pose.
The third and final piece I made was this fairy, and oh my goodness, it was an engineering challenge. Jane pointed out with this design that freestanding 3D figures are especially difficult to make stand up, and her solution was to make the wings really big so that it can stand on 4 points rather than 2. And again, with this design, I felt that the joins were just never strong enough, so I used a lot of reinforcements. I even used a toothpick through the body and her dress so that it would hold together and it wouldn't break up. I think the biggest thing that I got wrong here was the placement of the legs. My fairy probably shows a little bit too much leg compared to Jane's book, which meant that the measurements of the wings were slightly too short to hold her up and to be balanced. So that made attaching the wings a lot of trial and error, and so many times I'd glue it and then I'd let go thinking that the glue had attached, and only for her to fall down seconds later and everything to come apart. So in the photographs of the instructions, it looks like the wings are only glued at the back. And I tried that and I found that the wings were just too heavy for the glue to hold. And this was the same with the frog arms and head to the body. I felt that over time it would eventually just break off. So what I ended up doing was gluing the bottom wings and letting them dry overnight. And then when I added the top wings, I glued them to her arms as well to give a bit of extra support. And in the end, I didn't end up adding the flower because I liked her how she is. So I really love this fairy, and I think she looks so cool with her dress and her massive wings and her curly hair. What do you think of these figurines? I just think that they're so awesome. So overall, I love this book and I had a fantastic time making these 3D figures. I learned how to fringe a pom-pom, I practiced cup cones and coils, and I practiced a new sense of patience and engineering as I tried to make them all structurally sound and stand up on their own. So I know that one of the marks of a good quilling artist is to show minimal glue, but as I'm still a novice quiller, I was probably too generous with the glue, so you can still see a lot of glue marks on my final designs. So up until actually making these 3 pieces, the only 3D quilling I'd done was jewellery and a few flowers, and I made a Christmas tree for my mum and the little mushrooms that I did as part of the Quill November challenge in 2020. But after making these 3 figures, I feel so inspired to make more. And my brother actually suggested making a 3D nativity scene, which could be very interesting, so we'll see how we go. So thank you, Jane Jenkins, for publishing this book and sharing these fantastic designs. I really love them, and I love the little 3D figurine collection that I've now got. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye. If you enjoy the idea of 3D quilling, I highly recommend you watch my interview with the incredibly talented and inspiring quilling artist Leisha Politis. Her multi-award-winning 3D quilling is breathtaking. She's made a chess set, birdcage, succulent wreath, babushka dolls, and a Mad Hatter's tea set, just to name a few. I'll link it here.